Tower of Swallows, the Witcher book's follow-up to Baptism of Fire, my favorite Witcher book, and Tower of Swallows did give it a good run for its money, but I think I just liked Baptism of Fire a little more, showing the ramifications of war and how your average person could suffer, as well as the addition of a couple really great characters. Tower of Swallows continues the same overall feeling and maybe tone from Baptism of Fire, but uses it to show even darker sides to humanity, showing a more personal level rather than just the more broad scope ramifications of the terribleness of war. I figured after the dark downswing of Baptism of Fire in terms of just really embracing grimdark fantasy, that the next book would have a big upswing and start telling a little bit more of some lighter stories here, but that is certainly not the case. Tower of Swallows is as dark, if not darker, than Baptism of Fire. It feels that way not because there's like more overall gore, but because it's on a more personal level directed at the characters that we really love at this point. We follow Ciri probably the most she's ever been followed in the series up until this point, and really get to see the evolution of her character. I really enjoy that. Without getting into spoilers, it seems the mentality of telling Ciri's story in this book was how far can we push this innocent young girl who we got to know up to this point to where it becomes believable when she turns to a much darker version of herself. By no means evil and still an overall good person, but willing to commit some horrendous acts in arguably self-defense. And I really like that. It seemed like a simple idea that was explored to its full potential. Other characters are also pushed to their psychological limits or physical limits. There's really not one character who's having a good time during this story at all. The world still feels very gritty and down to earth, and honestly, for the first time, I kind of feel like I want some more fantasy elements to come in a little stronger, because they keep getting hinted and teased and shown bit by bit, but there's never just this really full-out embracing the fantasy genre in my mind. It's always just kind of on the back burner, and even just a couple of scenes where, oh my god, just look how cool and fantastical this part of the world is, would go a long way and be a nice contrast to the overall rather dreary tone, which I'm not burnt out from, but it just kind of feels like a slog. Not in the fact that the series is not as good as it's always been, it's just I'm continuing to having to read some very dark, depressing things. And as you guys are aware, I'm not the biggest fan of grimdark. I think The Witcher has the best balance of it of any book I've come across. I'm just looking for it to maybe tread back to where the first few books were, even just for a chapter or two, but it shows no sign of that. Even the positive events that happen in this story usually are tainted by some kind of darker undertones. It's really just putting every character we know so well at this point through the ringer, and I appreciate that immensely. The world still feels great. It's one of the best fantasy worlds in terms of just consistency I've ever come across, and it continues to show just deeper and deeper layers that weren't previously there up until this point, largely based on character, which I really appreciate. Every character is still great. This book introduced some of the best villains up until this point, or really grew some to the point where they were just phenomenal. You hate them, you fear them, and you understand and also relate to the characters' fear of them. It's just masterful. On a weird side note, every character seems to be at their least likable. Not that I'm not in love with them, it's just they're all in bad places and they're all kind of just dealing with the worst that they've had to put up with. Not because they're up against the worst odds, which they are in a way, but because they're just all so desperate and in this mindset of all having these objectives they want to accomplish, but struggling so much to accomplish these objectives. It makes the whole book have this feeling of anxiety about it that's just miserable but awesome. I haven't really seen an author to this point make his main characters all feel kind of helpless at times. Like, oh man, there's no way they're gonna get there in time. There's no way they're gonna get help. There's no rescue. It's just bad. That's all, folks. But what that allows for is some pretty stark, rapid growth from some of these characters. Just a realization of the terrible situations they're in and fighting back, which I really appreciate and was done incredibly well. I do finally have a complaint for a Witcher book, and that was really how this one ended. While I kind of loved certain aspects of it, there were other aspects that just felt uncomfortably maniacal or just came across as a sharp left turn, and I'm hoping the next book clears that up, and if that's the case, I can come back and wipe out this complaint and say, no, it actually made sense, I just didn't have the context for it yet. But unless there's some pretty crazy explanations or a real shifting of what is being exactly told here, I'm gonna have a complaint. Because as far as the magic system and rules come up until this point in the series, something was introduced that kind of just made me go Overall, Tower of Swallows is probably on the lower end of Witcher books for me. I just kind of was a little done with the super dark storytelling this series is stumbling into, was hoping for some redemption, and didn't get it. And I felt like this book was set up for that. And again, this is mildly personal preference, maybe a little bit just, yeah, the tone should have had that, how basic storytelling works, but I will never begrudge an author for trying to do something a little bit outside the box, like forgoing a traditional story arc. If you loved the last Witcher books, you'll love this one. It's just a series that is magnificent. And most of all, I think I just enjoy the pacing of the series. I've never been bored reading it. It's every chapter has information or events happening where you want to be reading it and involved in that exact moment. I get some people's complaints of wanting to just follow Geralt, though I disagree with that. I really enjoy people like Yennefer and Ciri who seem to be occupying more and more of the series. But I would like to jump into a little bit of spoilers here, so spoiler warning, 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 warning. So spoiler warning for some of you who have not finished the book, but if you do not care and want to follow me through, I'm going to go into spoiler talk right about now. So Yennefer's arc was a little bit disappointing to me, but also kind of I could tell needed to happen. She's been very powerful and almost untouchable to this point, and seeing her brought back down to earth and end in such a terrible situation made sense, and I get why it's regrounding the character. It also seems to maybe lead to a split of, oh, who am I going to go for Geralt, which I appreciate. Definitely Ciri, it seems like. At least that's my impression. Ciri's arc is one of the best arcs for the entire series up until this point, and I absolutely just thoroughly enjoyed it. Seeing someone who was so innocent and young when we met her really coming into a stage where you can tell this dark, gritty world has gotten to her, yet that original character remains. It's just becoming more and more tainted and tethered by the world around them. It's just great. And the execution, I really can't complain about any aspects of it. It's just wonderful. I appreciate the character work done for the series, probably over any other fantasy series in recent memory.
What did you say, punk?
But next we have Geralt, and I didn't enjoy the chapters following him probably most of all. They were extremely one note. It was just driving down this one path, and I didn't love that. I just kind of was like, can we get some change up here? And he's been like this since Baptism of Fire. Geralt seems to just be on this path that's just going straight, and there's no real turns that are really changing up how he's having to address the situation around him or the world around him. And I don't love that. It's okay, and I get the mindset behind it, but I just wish the execution had been a little bit different. Things just seem to be amping up in brutality, and it's this big build, and I really can't tell what this big build is for yet. There's been a couple misdirects throughout the series up until this point where I thought this person's gonna be a big baddie. No, okay, they're dead. And now it seems like, okay, I can't identify that this will be the next we need to deal with it problem. But I'm not entirely convinced, and I'm also just a bit confused overall still. Not confused due to just an unbelievably deep world or anything like that, or an incredible amount of characters, just a little untrusting of the author's storytelling up until this point, which sounds strange for after how much praise I've heaped on this series, but I think if you've read The Witcher, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'm going to give it a Witcher out of 10. I mean, I can't think of higher praise than that. It's still awesome and wonderful. I just have less enthusiasm for it right now, because it's like, come on, can we get a little more upbeat here? Can we do something that feels like progress and not like everyone but Ciri is stuck in some kind of miserable rut? Anyway guys, that's just my review of Tower of Swallows. I hope you liked it. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support my channel, and share the channel with anyone you know who loves fantasy and might enjoy all my different shows I got going on. But hope you're having a good day, y'all. Peace.